so I have a lot of students that struggle with dimensional analysis, and it may not be called dimensional analysis all the times. We start by calling it converting units, and then eventually we throw in the word dimensional analysis because that's a very large word. It's a very scary word. It's a very intimidating word. So sometimes we don't always start with the word, but the process is still very helpful. One thing I hate when we're converting units, when you're converting millimeters to kilometers, or when you're converting grams to kilograms, or when you're converting miles to feet, or yards to feet, or hours to minutes. I get very frustrated that sometimes you divide and sometimes you multiply. When you're going from big to small, you do one thing, and when you're going from small to big, you do another thing, and I hate math when it changes. I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of math anyway, but when I can't seem to find a pattern as to why it's doing this and why it's doing that, or it's a pattern that I'm going to have to remember, in this case you do this, and in this case you do that, it's just not going to sit well with me. I'm not the best memorizer. I can hardly tell you lefts and rights. It's the joys of getting married is now I always know what hand's my left hand. And so for dimensional analysis, it takes all that guesswork out. It puts consistency into the math, and I'm a big fan of consistency. Because then, as long as the problem says convert this to this, I know the process is going to be the same every single time. I no longer have to remember, okay, am I supposed to divide here or am I supposed to multiply here? What am I supposed to do? Which one is it? Because it's always going to be the same. And so what I do, the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to identify the piece of information they gave me. They gave me 65 miles per hour. Okay? So first thing, I'm going to write it as a fraction. 65 miles per hour. Now, if you don't have this second one, I always put it over 1 anyway. But that's essentially what you're saying is that we can go 65 miles in 1 hour if our speed is 65 miles per hour. So my first thing is to write it as a fraction. Then from that point on, I am going to always multiply by a fraction. That way I'm always multiplying and I'm always dividing. I'm always doing both. I don't have to keep track of which one am I supposed to do because my process will take care of what it's supposed to do. But in my head, I'm like, okay, I'm always multiplying by a fraction. And I know we hate fractions, and I know fractions freak us out. They're almost as bad as word problems. But remember, we have calculators. Whether you have a TI-84 Plus or the calculator I normally use for this type of a problem is actually a TI-30. So it's one of those ones with a little bitty screen that doesn't know how to graph, that's not big and fancy, and I just left next door instead of, I brought the one for the different video today. So what we're gonna do anytime you're told to change the units, what I wanna do is I wanna multiply by a fraction every single time. So my first one, I'm gonna multiply by a fraction. I don't really care about this, other than I know my answer needs to have yards on top and seconds on bottom. But other than that, I don't really care. And one example I gave yesterday to a student is I have a baby girl. She's 3 years old and she lets me do all sorts of fun things with her hair. I love to play with her hair and do different hairstyles. And if you find any fancy hairstyle on Pinterest and you go straight and try to make it look just like it, it's not gonna work. That's why we have all the fails, the Pinterest fails. Instead, you've got to kind of study the picture and say, okay, what did we do first? Well, first we did this and this, and then we made this and this, and then we made that and that, and then all of a sudden you have this awesome and amazing hairstyle. Okay? Obviously, I don't do it to my own hair, but hers is a lot more fun to play with. So what we need to do now, instead of trying to focus on the end, instead of trying to get overwhelmed with this huge project that we have in front of us at work, we need to focus on the very beginning. I like to start with the top. I don't know why, because it comes first, I guess. Who knows? You can start with the top or the bottom. It doesn't really matter. I just prefer to start with the top. I'm going to focus on the miles. I want to multiply by a fact, that means the top will equal the bottom, but they will have different units. A fact to get rid of minus. That's all I want right now. I want a fact that will eliminate miles. I'm not concerned with getting to yards. I want to get closer to yards. So case in point, I don't want to take miles to kilometers because that's not getting me anywhere closer to yards. But I do have this fact I wrote up here. Not all teachers are the same. You may or may not be given this fact. My classes will be given these two facts. I'm not giving them all the facts they need, but I don't expect my students to memorize 1 mile has 5,280 feet in it. Mainly because my students are liberal arts majors. They're not people who are going to be dealing with math, with these types of numbers. They'll be dealing with math in different ways, but they're not going to be dealing with this type of stuff every day without it being given to them. So I want a fact that would get rid of it. So what we're doing is we're pretty much reducing. And an example I give them during class is if we have 3/5 times 25 twelfths. And I say, okay, the way fractions work, we can do 3 divided by 5 times, instead of 25, I could do 5 times 5. Instead of 12, I could do 3 times 4. And then you can actually reduce across the fractions. But you can only reduce when 1 is on top and 1 is on bottom. So what we're reducing in dimensional analysis, we're not reducing the numbers like I was here. I was just showing the process. Sometimes things make more sense in numbers than words. We're not reducing the numbers, we are reducing the words. So I want to reduce the word miles. Now I can only reduce when one word is on top and one word is on bottom. So I currently have a miles on top. I have a fact that will get me from miles to feet. That's not quite to yards, but we'll finish that later. This miles, in order for it to do what I want, I need it to be on bottom. That way I have 1 on top and 1 on bottom. And then you're going to fill this fraction in with the rest of the fact. I need the top to equal the bottom. So here I was told 1 mile, so that's going to go on my mile, equals 5,280 feet. Right? Your miles will reduce away. But our answer didn't want feet, because that's the distance we have left is feet, right? Our answer didn't want feet. Our answer wanted yards. So we're going to keep going. I've gotten rid of miles, so I'm a little bit closer to my end goal, but I'm working in little bites. Just like if you have a large piece of cake, you don't just shove the entire cake in your face. That's a Matilda situation. Instead, you eat little pieces. And hopefully, if you're not like me, you don't end up eating the entire cake. That's what I would do. Hopefully you have a little bit more self-control than I do when it comes to desserts. But we're going to multiply by another one. My goal now, I want to get rid of feet. So here, I'm going to multiply by another fraction. Always multiply by fractions. I'm going to multiply by a fact to get rid of feet. Now my fact is still the same as the first one. The top must equal the bottom. Do we know any facts? I want to get rid of feet. So feet is currently on top. To get rid of it, I'm going to put it on bottom. And over here, I look at my facts. I know that 1 yard equals 3 feet. Feet has to be on bottom. Feet has the number 3 in front of it, so I'm going to put 3 there. And then it was equal to 1 yard. the feet, they go away. And hopefully y'all can see my color coding so y'all can see which one's canceling with which. Now, I have yards on top, correct? So yay, yards are on top. How exciting. Yards are on top. So then, I want to somehow get rid of hours. So I need seconds on bottom. I currently have hours way back here on bottom. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use red. I'm going to continue multiplying by a fraction. Don't worry about when to multiply, when to divide. Always multiply by a fraction. If hours are on bottom, remember you can only reduce when one is on top and when one is on bottom. So if hours are on bottom, my new hours needs to be on top. Okay? So if I have hours, I need some sort of fact that can get rid of hours. But I need to go closer to seconds. So I don't want to go from hours to days, or from hours to months, or from hours to years. I want to go closer to seconds. So I'm going to go from hours to minutes. Because we should know a fact that concerns hours to minutes. How many hours are in a minute? How many minutes are in an hour? Hopefully, y'all know that there's 60 minutes and 1 hour. So top equals bottom. This is my fact to get rid of, I'm trying to get rid of hours. Since hours is on top over here and on bottom over here, it can reduce away. Okay. I want seconds on bottom. I'm still not done. This is a relatively long one because I wanted to show the process. I wanted to show the long one. If I only show one with 2, it's like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And then it does it, they get to the longer ones, they're like, oh my God, what do I do? They panic. So I wanted to show y'all the longer one. We are not yet done. We need seconds. And we've got to be very careful. A lot of people accidentally miss minutes. So we're going to multiply by one more fraction. I want seconds, so I'm getting rid of minutes. If minutes is on bottom, I need to put it on top, because in order to reduce, you need one on top and one on bottom. So minutes is going to be there. I need a fact to get from minutes to seconds. I need the top to equal the bottom. 1 minute is 60 seconds. This way, minutes is going away. On top, the only word I have left is yards. Yay. On bottom, the only word I have left is seconds. That means you're almost done. So close to being done. What you're going to do next, you're going to multiply across. So in your calculator, we're going to start at the top. We have 65 times 5280 times 1 times 1 times 1 gives us 343,200. The only word left is yards. You cannot lose those words. To the bottom, we have 1 times 1 times 3 times 60 times 60. Gives us 10,800. The only word left on bottom is your seconds. And lastly, divide. 343,200 divided by 10,800. 31.8 yards per second. Okay, so that's the dimensional analysis. That's how to change from miles per hour to yards per second, but you can use that for any sort of units.